Hello, everybody. David Cloninger with the Charleston Post and Courier here, welcoming you to another edition of Countdown to Kickoff. South Carolina 2-1. Went on the road at Georgia last week, and whilst most people expected a blowout, they were blown out. But there are a lot of questions going around Columbia right now about South Carolina's approach to the next game. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the next game against Kentucky, and we'll also talk about the career of our special guest today. Pleased to welcome a man who was a USC player from 2006 to 2010, still a school record holder in career field goal percentage, a 3-year NFL veteran, and the best thing I can say about him, which I can only say about a handful of God's chosen people, he's from Rock Hill, South Carolina. Please welcome Spencer Lanning. Spence, how you doing?
Hey, buddy, how are you doing? I appreciate the intro. I don't get that very often. I'm going to have to hang out with you more often.
Well, you know how it is, man. I like to take care of my guys.
I appreciate that. We got to watch out.
We go back a ways, don't we?
That's right. That's right. Good people.
I know that you still keep up with South Carolina football. In fact, Spencer was the guy who included me in that within 3 days, 2 weeks ago, Ryan Suckup and Parker White each hit a 36-yard game-winning field goal from the left hash. Ryan in the NFL and then Parker at East Carolina. So I appreciate that shout out, Spencer.
Yeah, pretty unique little thing there, a little tidbit.
There you go. I know that you keep up with the Gamecocks still, so let's talk about Georgia. I didn't expect, a great result going into the game, but I thought, well, just show up, fight hard, compete. Let's see what you got. And they did fight hard. I thought the Gamecocks played hard throughout the game, but obviously the results weren't great. Offense wasn't great. What did you take away from the game?
So, when I look sort of back at the game, I agree with it that they fought hard. I think that, that was a major difference between, some of the games in the past from the previous years when they, sort of got outmatched, I guess. And there's no denying that Georgia has a terrific team. And, sort of to piggyback on what Coach Beamer said after the game, they have a roster full of studs, right? And that, that doesn't mean necessarily they're outcoached. And they still wear the same pads and the same helmets that we do. But at the end of the day, I think I mentioned to you in the past about sins and self-inflicted negatives, and
right.
you can't make mistakes against good ball clubs. And that's something that when I was playing, Coach Spurrier sort of, spoke about pretty much weekly.
Yep. Obviously, a lot of questions around Columbia, around the South Carolina program about their offense. And I think the problem, Spencer, is they said, well, if the offense had just kind of been decent in the first 2 games and then gotten hammered at Georgia, well, Georgia's real good, so that one's excused. But it really hasn't been. The offense has been inconsistent at best. It's kind of sputtered. The offensive line has looked, frankly, overmatched at times. What have you seen from a former player's perspective?
So I think, and not to bring up, unique challenges and talk about, the adversity, because I think, every team goes through those little bits of adversity. I think, having Doty sort of get, injured or, and having to play Zeb, I can't imagine when that first was mentioned that was a possibility, I couldn't help but, try to put myself in his shoes and think, wow, what an opportunity, because in his mind, he's already come to terms with, never throwing another pass. And next thing you know, he's sort of living the dream again. So, and I can't imagine trying to install an offense surrounding a guy that, you don't really know what you're going to get. Now, I think he did excellent for what he was given, right? But I think that the O-line still has some questions. And, that's one of the big things I know that they're going to focus on this week and try to establish a little bit of a running game and try to take some of that pressure off, because, one thing that, Coach Beamer alluded to, and I saw often, is that they were rolling that corner in, and we were having a hard enough time, picking up their schemes up front with just the big guys. And next thing you know, you got a wicked fast guy coming off the edge, and it just throws a wrench in things. And we really didn't have an answer for it. So, hopefully, coming into it, this game, we'll be able to establish the running game, because I think that opens up the rest of the entire playbook.
Sure. I mean, I think we all know, Spencer, that the got to run the ball to be successful. That's their strength. That's what they want to do. Nothing against the quarterbacks, but it's just been like, look, you've got an 1,100-yard rusher in your stable, so you got to use that guy. You don't want to have to depend on the pass, although the passing game, I mean, you see it. It hasn't been great, but it hasn't been terrible. You see some things happening there where Josh Vann, a guy who really hadn't done much for 3 years, is becoming a stud receiver. So you have options there, but you obviously want to get that running game started. So it is a case of like, how are you going to do it? I look at some of the offensive line schemes and say, okay, something's not right here because there are 4 starters back. and those starters had a really good rushing attack last year. What have you seen from that, Spencer? Have you had the same concerns I have?
Yeah. So, I think, everybody has these big, flashy offensive playbooks, right? I think there's a lot of offensive, especially new offensive coordinators in a new regime. It would be my thought that you would want to come out and sort of establish yourself and sort of prove to Gamecock Nation and to the rest of the SEC that, we have a powerful offense and sort of, present the big package, for the big unwrapping. So I think, that would be what my mindset would be. And then I think, taking into account with the quarterback situation and that little step back in adversity. But yeah, absolutely. I think in my mind, you would want to commit to simple schemes that can be effective and just commit to pounding the ball. And like you said, we got a stable full of horses. I've been super impressed with Juju and watching him sort of, be a dynamic, as small as he is, he runs straight up and down. It reminds me a lot of Josh Cribbs. So he hits the hole with some power. So I think that they have a lot of talent back in the backfield. I think they have a talented team and let's not forget that this is a very young team. And I think that they are absolutely headed on the right track. But yeah, to me, I'd really like to see him just line up and commit to pounding the ball. And then, like you said, that opens up everything in the SEC.
There you go. And just as now's a good time, thanks for everybody for attending. If you have a question for myself or for Spencer, please log it into the Q&A section on the bottom of your screen there. Marcus Satterfield did say this year or this week, Spencer, and it's not an excuse, but it is kind of a reason. Keep in mind, they designed this playbook to revolve around Luke Doty, a running quarterback. They thought
right.
Harris would be fine. And all of a sudden, you're a week into preseason camp, Luke Doty sprains his foot, and he's gone for the rest of preseason and didn't play the first 2 games. And Kevin Harris had all-season back surgery, didn't play the first game, and was limited in the second game. So there is still a benefit of the doubt that, well, you design your playbook around these 2 guys, and they weren't available. So maybe that leads into the problem. But from of ex-player's perspective, Spencer, from a fan's perspective, what do you look at for this weekend's game in Kentucky and say, I want to see this right off from an offensive perspective?
So I think we need to challenge the edge. When Georgia was able to sort of pin their ears back and seal the edge so that, the pocket sort of collapsed on us when we were trying to run the ball. We really don't have anything on the outside to bounce. We were running very linearly north-south. And obviously that sort of takes away from a team's dynamic ability to, really open up the offense. And like you mentioned, you take away the fact that, Luke can get outside the pocket and actually, pose a threat and run those speed options. It'd be, obviously it wouldn't be very much. They would not be thinking that I would ever be running the ball if I were back there. So, but I know that has to go into the game plan. And like you said, I can't imagine designing an offense and, getting somebody coached up and putting their faith in, hope in them. And then, but I think that's ultimately something that we'll hopefully get this the staff and take a little bit of the edge off. If everything runs too perfect in the middle of the year, a little hiccup usually ends up being, extremely detrimental. So it's not ideal, but I'd rather go ahead and get through the bumps in the road right now.
Defensively, USC has some busts against Georgia, but their 3rd straight game, and obviously only 3 games in the season, where they had multiple takeaways. I mean, they're getting their hands on some loose footballs there, Spencer, and just how much does that do for the morale of a team, the confidence of a team on the sideline when you see those guys pull down an interception or recover a fumble?
So, I think it does everything. I can remember, watching, Stephon Gilmore, Chris Culliver, Emmanuel Cook, Norwood. You can imagine all those guys. And there was something special on that defense that I played with for sure. And I can't tell you how awesome it was to watch the defense just go out there and fly around. And, did we get burned a couple of times? Absolutely. But I think, anytime on a defensive scheme, as Coach Spurrier would say, there's always a hole somewhere. So, it's one of those things that you're sort of playing chess and hoping that you're gambling on the right things as a defense. And like I said, I've been very impressed with their ability to fly around and sort of celebrate with each other when the big plays do happen.
Yeah. So Georgia aside, let's look ahead to Kentucky. Now, Spencer, when you were in school, this was a gimme game. You guys pretty much always beat Kentucky. Of course, your senior year.
I was about to say.
Kind of fell apart there.
Yeah, a little trap game, huh?
Not a great deal for the Rock Hill kids in that game, as I recall either.
Yeah. Try to block that one out as much as possible.
It happens, but this series was very one-sided. South Carolina won 14-15 in one stretch against Kentucky, but since that stretch ended, Kentucky's won 6 out of 7. Now, some of that USC was going through some rough seasons where coaching change, didn't have the roster. Some of them they just lost. But what I look at, Spencer, Kentucky's got an underrated program right now. Bob Stoops has had a 10-win season. He's had a few 8-win seasons. What have you seen from the Wildcats as they've continued to grow under Stoops?
So, I think they got I think what they were missing in the past was a super dynamic quarterback. And I think that they've got that in Levis, whatever his,
Levis.
Yep. Yeah. He's back there. And, when they're a little feast or famine too at the moment on offense and defense for that matter. But, I think that, they have that capability of hitting it while it's hot, just like we do. And if we can just sort of get things rolling, or if they could just sort of get things rolling in the right direction, when they've, watch how they started out of the gate versus Missouri, and not so much at the end. Same thing, sort of the Chattanooga game was sort of, I'm sure it was a wake up call. And I know that Coach Stoops and that family does a terrific job. And I guarantee you, he is just running that through their head this week to make sure that doesn't happen again this week, because it's going to be national spotlight again and an opportunity for recruiting. And Kentucky's got a good ball club, and they're very, very, very well coached. I know they got a new offensive coordinator too, so they're dangerous.
Well, one thing about Mark Stoops, the only blemish really on his record, I think he's only won 8 SEC road games.
Right.
Entire tenure at Kentucky, but guess what, sports fans? 2 of them have been in Columbia. So
he's obviously not that intimidated by.
Yeah, they've got to watch out, and including was that 2017 game where it started out perfect. Debo Samuel scores on the first play,
right?
Throws an interception, but things just have a habit to start snowballing there, and they did that game. So you look at this one, they have Will Levis really throwing the ball well. They have Chris Rodriguez running the ball well. They have Wandale Robinson catching the ball well. Their defense has been kind of suspect. As Spencer mentioned, they've kind of taken a while to get going on offense the last couple of games. But what are the keys to this game for USC to win?
I think, eliminating the big plays for Kentucky on offense. If you look at some of their, we always call them home run balls. They are running a long play action. There's some of their plays, they don't really have a bailout underneath. They don't have, a little flare to dish out on. They're swinging for the fences, so to speak. It's either throw it away for an incompletion or try to hit it out of the park for that quarterback. And he's got a very quick wind up and he can sling it. I think eliminating those big plays and trying to contain the run, just like, I'm sure, they're going to try and plan against us. It's almost like, the game plan, I think, is probably going to be similar for each other, and just trying to eliminate the self-induced negatives that, we were sort of talking about earlier. Because I think that's ultimately, the takeaways is probably going to be the difference in the game.
Yeah, they've got some horses up front on that offensive line. I think they average probably about 305 per man. There's only one sub 300 pounder on that entire line. They're big, they're strong, they're experienced. And as we saw last week, it doesn't matter how good of a defense is. If you can't get any pressure on the quarterback, he's going to find a man to throw it. South Carolina couldn't touch JT Daniels. And if they try, or if they can't get anything done against Will Levis this Saturday, probably going to be a long night. Just what can you do, Spencer, as a defensive guy to say, all right, we're not getting any pressure with this. Do you sell out and try to blitz every play? Or is that just leaving you too exposed on the back end?
So, once again, I think on defense, as a defensive coordinator, I think you're a little bit of a gambler, right? I think you're trying to hit it at the right time, and, you're trying to corner roll, and you're trying to, throw some exotic formations in there for these guys to try and mix it up a little bit. I don't know if that's dropping D line, and sort of blitzing the mic, or, I really don't know what necessarily that looks like, if it's manning up and, trying to sort of get some pressure on the quarterback. I guarantee you they're going to throw them a lot of, especially if he hasn't really been challenged with some of the zones and formations and stuff and looks on defense. I guarantee you they're going to have a lot of they built in a lot of schemes for the SEC, and some of these quarterbacks are going to see.
Looking at Kentucky, I mean, just their defense, it seems like, well, these guys probably aren't going to be that tough to run through. But then again, we probably could have said the same thing about Eastern Illinois and East Carolina, and you saw how much South Carolina struggled at times to run through there. So I guess what I want to know, Spencer, here, if you've got the plan, you say, we're going to hand the ball 30 times to Kevin Harris. how much patience can you have with that, saying it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work? Is there a point where you look up at the scoreboard and say, okay, we got to quit this and start doing something else? Or can you have the patience to run that the whole game?
So, I think it's a little bit of a gut check thing, maybe in the locker room. If it were me, I would go to the offense and just say, hey guys, this is our plan and we're committed to it. I believe that, our team is better than their team, and we're going to line up and see what happens. Right. Coach Spurrier used to challenge our players a lot in big situations and big games. And a lot of times we probably were a little bit outmanned. But to me, if that's the game plan, then we're committing to it, and it's one of those hell or high water type scenarios where you don't want to let the game slip away. But if you can sort of control the negatives and you can pound the rock, I think going 3 and out and punt for field position, and that's a former punter saying this, ain't a bad strategy sometimes in the SEC.
Sure, yeah. Night game, Williams-Brice Stadium. Last year, there were some night games, but it wasn't the full effect because of COVID restrictions. No restrictions this year in terms of capacity. Fans check the face mask requirements if you got to wear one, but you should be able to be in there. And I think there's less than 1,000 tickets available for this game. How much does the game atmosphere matter for a game like this, Spencer?
So I think when I look back at the biggest games I played in, I think about how much the crowd played into those games. I think about Ole Miss on Thursday night. I think about Alabama at home. I think about playing Georgia at home. I think all those big time SEC matchups matter. And I think that especially at night with our fan base and you've seen what it means to Coach Beamer, and he is what you see is what he was when I was playing. And it makes him a very special human being and an excellent coach. And I think, that is really easy to sell to players and get players to buy into. It was easy for me to buy into, that he was going to love and support us and give us, all the coaching that we needed. And, so I think that the cockpit's going to be rocking. I hope it's going to be rocking. I hope we can sort of push it to a sellout. Sadly, I'll be in New York watching, but I'll be screaming at the TV with me and my 2 little girls and my wife up here in New York.
I was about to say, I know you kind of married or met your wife in Carolina, and I know that you with Clemson roots, but how does it go in your family? You guys all in for South Carolina these days?
Yeah. So, I think when we have guys, after the players that we played with and some of the coaches, as they sort of leave, it sort of gets to be, where you're still a fan of South Carolina. I'm never going to stop, but now that it's just a little more special now, right? We have Coach Beamer, we have one of our own. And, I think my mom and dad being, still living in Rock Hill, obviously they both went to Clemson. I know they watch the Clemson games, but they are absolutely, pulling for Coach Beamer and the Gamecocks every single week. And, it is a big point of my schedule for the weekends to make sure that my wife and my family sort of know what I'm going to be doing and when to watch the Gamecocks play.
I'll tell you, man, I know you don't get down here that often, but you have been back a few times. It's changed a lot around the stadium. I mean, the most thing, they've moved that Bojangles from across the street, and now it's a couple of blocks away. I mean, I know over that one, right?
Yeah. So, it has changed a lot, and I thought what we had whenever Coach Spurrier was there was special. And then I saw those plans that they were sort of raising funds for whenever I was playing. I was like, okay, sure. I know how this goes. It starts out as this, the Taj Mahal, and then it's sort of whatever we can afford. But, I think when I was down there this summer to sort of help out with the special teams camps and whatnot, I was blown away, of course, at the facilities. They compared to the NFL, I never saw an NFL facility that looked quite like the one we have down there in Columbia. So that's certainly that weight room that they have is unbelievable. I mean, it's soundproof and it's built out to just, build football players. So yeah, I think they have everything that they could need down there. And they've certainly got, a great opportunity to sort of build some quality players down there.
Let's get into it, Spencer. Let's talk about your career. Obviously, a guy coming out, a very fair, for those of you who don't know, outstanding soccer player in high school was Spencer Lanning. And then I believe it was a knee injury that turned you into football. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I tore my ACL between my sophomore and junior year of school. And, it was a huge setback. But, I tell people this all the time, and they always look at me like I'm a little bit crazy. But it was the best thing that ever happened in my life because, I look at where I would have ended up. I probably would have never gone to South Carolina. being a Clemson fan growing up. And that means I never, would have met you, Dave, and, we would be talking here right now, and I never would have met my wife, and, the rest is sort of history. So, it absolutely, you always hear that everything happens for a reason. This is true in this case for sure.
Oh, we still would have met. I remember covering you hitting the game-winning kick at the North-South game as a senior at York.
Yeah, that's right.
But I probably wouldn't have kept up with you as much if you hadn't come here. So
yeah, and I probably would have still been playing soccer. I was still been a soccer guy. So yeah, it's crazy how everything turns out for sure.
And let's hear it in your own words, complete with a Spurrier impression if you feel good about it. How did you get to be the guy with two last names?
So Coach Spurrier is he's probably got one of the best sense of humors, and he has a soft spot for specialists. And but make no mistake about it, he hated when he had to send me out there to punt. Like, and there were several times where he sent me out there to kick a field goal in some pretty big games where, I would start jogging out there on 4th and 2, like sort of looking at Coach Spurrier, because we'd all look at Coach Spurrier to figure out what was going to happen. And he'd just say, "Oh, you just kick it." All right. You go running out there, you're like, "Oh man, I better make this field goal." But the Lanning Spencer thing was funny. So he I think that he sort of got mixed up on whether my first name was Lanning or my last name was Lanning. And, he comes out at practice one day, and, we're warming up to kick field goals first period with the team. And he's like, "Lanning, is your first name, is it Spencer Lanning or is it Lanning Spencer?" And I was like, "My first name is Spencer, Coach." He's like, "Oh, I know. I'm just messing with you. And then it was like the next press conference, he called me Lanning Spencer. So ever since that, that's where my Twitter handle came from, and pretty much all my handles came from. But yeah, listen, I can't think of a greater influence on my football development than Coach Spurrier, and he is by every other definition, he's a winner.
During your career, Spencer, especially the later part of it, you place kicked and punted. And these days, you do see it occasionally, but not a lot. I think a lot of coaches prefer to have one punter, one place kicker. Has the game just changed since then? Were you the special exemption, or was it just, this was the best guy at the time, so that's why you got to do both?
Yeah, I would like to think that I was special, but I think, at the end of the day, I think I'd be lying to myself a little bit there. No, I think that I probably was just, I was the best, Coach Beamer and Coach Spurrier said that the best man at each position was going to play. I punted when Suckup was a senior, and was able to sort of take over that and sort of grow into, learning how to become an SEC special teams player. And then, it sort of won the kicking competition my junior year. And it is a lot on your leg, but it is sort of useful. You just know that every time the offense is going to get the ball and we get to 4th down, I'm probably going to do something, right? So you're always warm. And I actually prefer, looking back at it, how it was in the NFL, I actually prefer it because you were always sort of in the game. You didn't have the ability, and we punted a lot in Cleveland. So I'm not saying that that it was like that, but there was some, the chance of us punting only once or twice and sort of getting cold during the game.
Sure, I get you. Looking back at your career, Spencer, what's the biggest kick you remember making?
Oh man, so biggest kick, I had a north-south, if you want to call it a game winner. I sort of went back and looked at some film the other day about the Georgia game, my second game kicking field goals. We went up to Raleigh and I sawed off a PAT and sawed off a 27, 24, 26. It was a very short field goal. And that was my first 2 kicks. And there was a bobbled snap on a hold. So, to come and go play in Georgia, where you're talking about that environment in football and what it means, that place was loud. And we went 5 of 5 that day. And, I was fortunate enough, and that just goes to show you what kind of coach Coach Beamer is. He said, "Spence, you're our guy, and we're going to stick with you." And I was certainly understood after that first game if he would have considered making a change. Because I probably was a little bit rattled, but those 5 field goals, that game were huge to me. Just looking back and sort of getting that momentum, and then the 3 field goals that we hit in Florida my senior year, and that whole game. There were so many games my senior year that it was like the adrenaline was flowing the entire game, and you could sort of look back and feel that you were a part of something special.
I've always wanted to ask other players this, Spencer, because, even after the Alabama game in 2010, and you realize it's like, this could be pretty special. Things maybe got tempered a little bit the next week at Kentucky, but then you guys are going down to Florida with the SEC's title on the line. and pretty one-sided game. You know, Marcus.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a dominant game. Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys were ahead. I was sitting up there in the box thinking, I'm not going to write this like it's going to happen. I'm not going to believe this until it's actually done.
Right.
Not used to seeing South Carolina in this position. What were you guys thinking on the sideline? I'm sure you were confident, but was there ever that moment of like, you know, you're this close to Atlanta and it's about to happen?
Yeah, so I think coming into the game, we had some momentum, and you know, obviously it was Coach Spurrier going back to the Swamp, and you know, it was going to be a big game. It was going to be national, CBS televised. You know, you had everything that you would want to be the setup, the precursors for you know, a hallmark game, so to speak. And I just remember the opening kickoff, I believe, was returned for a touchdown by Florida. And I don't think we even came close to touching them. I think we had two guys like knocked out. They like trap blocked us on the back end. And I just remember thinking, because Jay Wooten was kicking off. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this can't be how this goes down today. And, you know, we had Marcus Lattimore running the ball like, you know, an absolute savage that he is running. And Steven Garcia playing with a little bit of his chip on his shoulder, and, you know, just typical Garcia, and everything, you know, we hit it in stride. And I think that, yeah, it was one of those things that you sort of realize later in the second half, after, you know, they made some big time mistakes and we made some big time plays on defense, that you realize that you were part, you know, we were going to be part of something special.
Yeah, it's kind of funny as an aside there. I believe it was the year before in 2009 playing Clemson, they returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Shane Beamer has always joked about it, said after that Florida game, man, maybe I should just let him return the opening kickoff.
I know.
That's going to be the result. But, you know, you guys finished that season SEC's champions, and you win your second straight over Clemson. What do you remember about that Clemson game in 2010? As I recall, that was one where, and again, it is a bias, and I'm proud of it, the Rock Hill guys really showed out. You, Stephon, Torrey Gurley, all you guys had really big games. Devontae as well. Yeah.
So, you know, I'll always, you know, it's obvious that South Carolina Clemson always means something to me and my family, you know, and have my grandparents there. And, you know, looking back after football's done, that's what I miss more than anything, right? You know, you miss playing the game, but you miss having your family and your folks there. And, you know, those games were always special. But that Clemson game that year, you know, hit a couple big field goals. Absolutely. Some of the Rock Hill guys just showed out. You know, but it was another one of those games where we really sort of hit it in stride, and we just had a little bit of swagger and confidence about us going into Death Valley. And it was another nighttime game. You know, it was a little warm, crisp air. It was just a perfect football weather. I can just really remember after I punted late in the game, they left their defensive safe out there, and Daquan Bowers, I believe, was lined up across. There's a picture out there of him looking at me like, what are you talking about? You know, as he's running by me. And somebody asked me what I was saying. I'm always a pretty big smack talker. I always thought it was funny, right? That a punter could talk smack, you know, to a bunch of real football players. So I think I was jawing at Daquan, and then all of a sudden I realized that there was no one really around me to protect me. And I think I saw that little twinkle in his eye. He was just like, I think he was had enough of my mouth. But there was a pretty cool picture floating around of him. You know, I don't even remember what I said to him, but I just remember that I had the opportunity and I took it.
And last question, Spencer, as we wrap this thing up, how many nights do you just lie awake, you know, you can't get to sleep and you realize, I'm from Rock Hill. Why didn't I go to Northwestern instead of your comprehensive?
You know what? It's another one of those things that worked out well for me, though. You know, at one time, Dave, how about this? I tried to transfer for soccer, and but because I'd already established eligibility in York, where my mom was a teacher, you know, for 20 something years, you know, they said that I'd have to enroll in a bunch of like IB and AP classes and all sorts of stuff to transfer. Ended up not doing it. Once again, everything happens for a reason, right?
Well, you know, you look good in purple, but that's okay, man.
Sure.
We're garnet and black. I want to thank you, Spencer, for joining me today. I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Please keep in mind that we still got Gamecocks now. My newsletter comes out 4 or 5 times a week. It's a 2-week free trial where I'll give you all the inside stuff that I'm hearing from the program and can put you out. And of course, we'll have another countdown to kick off next week as South Carolina finishes up Kentucky and hosts Troy. So once again, I want to thank Spencer Lanning for joining me. I want to thank all you fans for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. DC, check it out.
See you guys.